Thank you, Nina and Ricky. Good evening, everyone. I'm Alma Angeles for NET25 World News. On tonight's headlines. A dramatic about-face from President Trump just hours after imposing sweeping tariffs on numerous nations. He announced a temporary rollback while simultaneously escalating trade tensions with China.
Well, I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, you know? They were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid, including China. China wants to make a deal. They just don't know how quite to go about it. You know, it's one of those things they don't know how quite. They're proud people.
And the news starts now. A dramatic about-face from President Trump just hours after imposing sweeping tariffs on numerous nations. He announced a temporary rollback while simultaneously escalating trade tensions with China. Now, this sudden shift triggered a massive stock market rally following a period of intense volatility that had rattled global markets and raised recession fears. Take a look.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Wednesday announced he would pause his reciprocal tariffs on many countries for 90 days, but he raised tariffs further on imports from China. The announcement came less than 24 hours after steep new tariffs kicked in on imports from dozens of trading partners.
Well, I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, you know? They were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid.
U.S. stocks surged following the announcement, with the benchmark S&P 500 climbing more than 9%. Trump's tariffs had hammered markets, raised the odds of recession, and prompted retaliatory responses from China and the European Union. Trump said he would raise the tariff on Chinese imports to 125%. From the 104% level that took effect at midnight, further escalating a high-stakes confrontation between the world's two largest economies. He said he would at the same time suspend targeted tariffs on other countries for 90 days to allow time for U.S. officials to negotiate with countries that have sought to reduce them.
The Trump administration is really doubling down on being tough on China. China is certainly not backing off. I think it'll be interesting to see whether China reciprocates for a third time. I think that could be likely. But this is likely to reshape global trade if this persists. If nothing changes, 125% tariffs on Chinese exports to the U.S. is immense. We import a massive amount, hundreds of billions of dollars from China. That will have to go somewhere else. I think it's going to rapidly change supply chains for companies who now operate heavily in China. That's already been happening the last few years. You know, the seeds were sown for a lot of movement for companies like Apple and Nike and many others to shift to countries like Vietnam and India and other South Asian countries where production costs are obviously lower than they would be in the US, which is why the reciprocal tariffs were so damaging, is because the scope was so broad. There was really nowhere to hide. But now, assuming deals are going to be done and things are going to sort of develop at a much calmer pace, it's very likely that companies can have the confidence to start to invest in moving their supply chains to countries that are not going to have, 50, 100% tariffs. And that is going to squeeze China. It's certainly still going to be, a cost impact to the consumer, but a much lower one than what we were going to have even, again, a day ago.
A 10% blanket duty on almost all U.S. imports will remain in place.
Nothing's over yet, but we have a tremendous amount of spirit from other countries, including China. China wants to make a deal. They just don't know how quite to go about it. It's one of those things they don't know how quite. They're proud people. And President Xi's a proud man. I know him very well. And they don't know quite how to go about it, but they'll figure it out. They're in the process of figuring it out, but they want to make a deal.
This is chaos. This is government by chaos.
The top Democrat in the U.S. Senate, Chuck Schumer, blamed Trump for hurting the country but said he was gratified by the president's latest move.
Donald Trump is feeling the heat from Democrats and across America about how bad these tariffs are. He is reeling, he is retreating, and that is a good thing. We are going to continue to put the heat on him because there are still much damaging tariffs in place.
Since Trump announced broad tariffs late on April 2nd, stocks had fallen more than 12% for their biggest four-day sell-off in 5 years.
I think this is a massive, massive benefit for consumers, for investors. I think everybody's breathing a sigh of relief because it's been extremely chaotic for the last few days. Obviously, this leaves us with at least 90 days of slightly more stability than we've had, which is great. I think it puts investors in a position where they can hopefully reset, regroup, and probably rebalance. If anybody has been really sweating this market drop, it's time to readjust your risk tolerance and your risk exposure to try to better reflect exactly how much you can really take.
Meanwhile, China's Commerce Ministry says it's open to trade talks with the U.S., but insists any dialogue must be based on equality and mutual respect.
中方的立场是明确一贯的。
China's position is clear and consistent. The door to talks is open, but dialogue must be conducted on an equal basis with mutual respect. China will stand by its position until the end. Pressuring, threatening, and blackmailing are not the correct ways to deal with China. We hope that the U.S. will work with China. Based on the principles of mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and a win-win cooperation, we will properly resolve differences through dialogue and consultation. Thank you.
通过对话、协商，妥善解决分歧。谢谢。
I have reiterated China's position many times, and it is very clear. We do not provoke trouble, nor do we fear trouble. The legitimate development rights of the Chinese people and the people of the world cannot be taken away. China's and like all other countries' sovereignty, security, and development interests should not be infringed upon.
不容侵犯。
Tensions between the United States and China continue to escalate, with a new diplomatic row emerging alongside ongoing trade disputes. The controversy centers on recent comments made by U.S. Vice President JD Vance during a Fox News interview. Let's listen to exactly what Vice President Vance said.
Ask ourselves, what has the globalist economy gotten the United States of America? And the answer is fundamentally it's based on two principles: incurring a huge amount of debt to buy things that other countries make for us. And to make it a little bit more crystal clear, we borrow money from Chinese peasants to buy the things those Chinese peasants manufacture. That is not a recipe for economic prosperity. It's not a recipe for low prices, and it's not a recipe for good jobs in the United States of America.
Vance's reference to Chinese citizens as peasants has triggered widespread backlash in China, becoming a trending topic on social media platforms with over 140 million views. Many users condemned the remarks as disrespectful, with some even calling for the vice president to be barred from entering China. The Chinese government has officially responded through Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian. Here's what he had to say.
China's position on China-U.S. trade relations has been made very clear. It is surprising and saddening to hear such ignorant and disrespectful remarks from this vice president.
Critics have pointed to the irony of Vance's statement, noting his own humble beginnings that he detailed in his memoir, Hillbilly Elegy. They've contrasted his background with China's significant advancements in technology and infrastructure in recent decades. This diplomatic incident adds another layer of complexity to already strained U.S.-China relations, which have been further complicated by ongoing trade disputes and recent tariff escalations. The Chinese government has reiterated its commitment to defending its interests, warning it will fight to the end in response to U.S. trade measures. The international community continues to watch these developments closely, recognizing the potential global implications for both trade and diplomacy. Nevada Congressman Stephen Horsford berated United States Trade Representative Jameson Greer on the Trump administration's escalating tariff policy. Let's listen in.
Representative, are you aware that the tariffs have been paused?
I am, yes.
When were you made aware of that?
Well, I understood the decision was made a few minutes ago. It's something
Sitting here,
that's under discussion.
Sitting here, under discussion. So did you know that this was under discussion, and why did you not include that as part of your opening remarks?
So typically what I don't do is divulge the contents of my discussions with
What are the
President
details of the
Congress.
pause?
Well, my understanding is that because so many countries have decided not to retaliate, we're going to have about 90 days.
No, excuse me? China increased their tariffs on the United States. Trump blinked.
What's the blink, sir?
What do you know about this pause? What are the details of it?
Well, the details, as I understand it, is that China continues to retaliate. Other countries didn't retaliate. The president 2 or 3 days ago said we wanted to negotiate with those countries that asked for meetings. That's what we're doing.
What are the
We've had
details?
discussions.
How long is the pause? How many days? How many weeks?
I understand it's 90 days. I haven't spoken to the president since I've
So
been
the
in this
trade
hearing.
representative hasn't spoken to the president of the United States about a global reordering of trade.
Yes, I have. I've
And
just
yet
been in the hearing with you, sir.
But yet he announced it on a tweet. Who's in charge?
The president of the United States is in charge.
And what do you know about those details?
Well, as I mentioned,
It looks like your boss just pulled the rug out from under you. People who are retiring whose benefits have declined. Is this market manipulation?
no.
Why not? If it was a plan, if it was always the plan, how is this not market manipulation?
It's not market manipulation, sir.
Well, then what is it? Because it sure is not a strategy.
We're trying to reset the global trade system.
The ripple effects of U.S. tariff policies are causing significant concern across Asia, with analysts warning of potential economic instability and social unrest. Take a look.
So for the people in Vietnam or Thailand, if they work in the factories now, it's not easy anymore for them to find jobs there. If there were no tariffs, then they might enjoy a large raise, bigger package. But if there is reciprocal tariffs, these factories might need to be relocated again. So definitely very bad news for those workers there. So that's for the supply side.
That's Mei Yu Wan, Assistant Professor of Economics at Singapore Management University, highlighting the immediate impact on workers in manufacturing hubs. The uncertainty surrounding these tariffs is also a major concern.
Plus, the worry about the uncertainty, right? Now, those countries have 90 days for 10%. Nobody knows what will happen after 90 days, right? So maybe Vietnam will face 46% again, right? So that means potential investors will hold back. They won't do any large-scale investment in those countries.
The potential for widespread unemployment stemming from these policies raises serious concerns about social stability.
Massive unemployment because of this policy, because of the tariffs, then I think it's a real possibility. But it also depends on how the government responds, right? Bangladesh already had a large scale kind of social unrest a few months ago. Maybe a little push would also trigger another even bigger social unrest.
It's not just manufacturing jobs at stake. Consumer goods are also expected to see price increases.
Again, using the iPhone example, right? If the production of some models have to be shipped back to the US, right, in an extreme scenario, those models will be super expensive, and consumers in other countries will be affected. Right? Those are the products that involve more complex global supply chain, right? For other grocery products like foods, maybe they are more majority of these kind of products are supplied within the Asian region. So they are less affected.
While some economies may be more insulated than others, a global recession triggered by these tariffs would have far-reaching consequences.
So these countries, they have benefited tremendously from the first U.S.-China trade war. Now, because of the reciprocal tariffs, for example, Trump announced that the tariff on Vietnam would be 46%. That's a huge amount of tariff, and that would seriously hit those economies. Other economies like Singapore are not directly affected. Singapore's major exports are semiconductors and pharmaceuticals, which are exempted from the reciprocal tariffs. But if the tariffs are dragging the whole global economy into a recession, then these economies like Singapore would also have to bear the spillover effect.
Bangladesh's garment industry, vital to its economy, faces challenges from rising U.S. tariffs, threatening exports, jobs, and economic stability. Crystal Mapa is in Bangladesh for this report.
Yes, Alma. Here in Bangladesh, the nation's vital garment industry is reeling after President Trump's latest tariff announcement. A newly imposed 37% tax on exports to the United States has sent shockwaves through the sector. Industry leaders are expressing shock, but also hope that the interim government led by Mohammed Yunus can renegotiate with the U.S. The United States is Bangladesh's largest market for its $32 billion garment industry, accounting for nearly $10 billion in exports. Millions of workers, mostly women, face potential financial hardship if the tariffs remain. The garment sector is crucial to Bangladesh's economy, representing over 80% of total exports, employing 4 million people and contributing roughly 10% to the country's GDP. This latest tariff blow comes after a year of disruptions, including violent protests that ousted the previous prime minister, casting doubt on the industry's stability. The stakes are high for Bangladesh. The industry and the government now face the urgent challenge of mitigating the impact of these new tariffs and preserving the livelihoods of millions. Reporting here from Bangladesh, this is Crystal Mapa for NET25 World News. Back to you, Alma.
The landscape for developing Asia and the Pacific's economic growth was relatively stable prior to the recent U.S. reciprocal tariff announcement. Now, the region was projected to grow at 4.9% this year and 4.7% next, down from 5% last year. Now, here's ADB Chief Economist Albert Park, who also anticipated easing inflation driven by lower global food and energy prices. However, these tariffs have fundamentally altered this outlook.
Taking into account new U.S. reciprocal tariffs announced last week, we were expecting economies in developing Asia and the Pacific to grow by 4.9% this year and 4.7% next year, down from 5% last year. Inflation was expected to ease to 2.3% in 2025 and 2.2% in 2026 as global food and energy prices continue to drop. Solid domestic demand and resilient exports led by electronics and semiconductors have been supporting growth. But if U.S. reciprocal tariffs are fully implemented, it will increase uncertainty and is likely to slow trade, investment, and growth in the region. Despite the challenging environment, Asian economies should maintain their commitment to open trade and investment, which have supported the region's growth and resilience, and pursue cooperative efforts to resolve differences and deepen regional economic integration.
Southeast Asian countries are pressing for dialogue with the U.S. on trade tariffs and will not impose retaliatory measures, economic ministers of the regional bloc of ASEAN said today. Now, before a 90-day pause was announced by U.S. President Donald Trump on the implementation of U.S. tariffs, 6 of 9 Southeast Asian countries targeted by the U.S. administration were slapped with much bigger than expected tariffs of between 32 and 49%. Now, by comparison, the level for the European Union was 20%, Japan was 24%, and India's 27%. We expressed our common intention to engage in a frank and constructive dialogue with the U.S. to address trade-related concerns. Open communication and collaboration will be crucial to ensuring a balanced and sustainable relationship, according to the Association of Southeast Asian Nations Economic Ministers in a statement, which expressed concern about the tariffs and their impact. Following a meeting on Thursday, the ministers said they reaffirmed their support for a predictable, fair, and rules-based multilateral trading system. The 10-member ASEAN is collectively the world's 5th biggest economy, and its members are heavily reliant on exports as a driver of growth.
I would like to summarize perhaps 4 points that were raised. The first one is that the ASEAN trade ministers have gotten together and have decided to communicate with the U.S., I think, three main points. First is to reaffirm the long, enduring, and strong relationship with the U.S. Second, though, is to express their concern over these unilateral tariffs that are being imposed on the ASEAN. And third is to engage in a frank and constructive dialogue with the U.S. to reaffirm their readiness, or our readiness in ASEAN, to work together to explore mutually acceptable solutions on issues of common interest. But I would like to say that there are probably 2 key takeaways here. One is that every country will continue with their bilateral negotiations with the U.S. and concurrently conduct a regional discussion with the U.S. And the key words are cooperation, not retaliation.
Meanwhile, China and Malaysia, currently leading ASEAN, held a crucial video meeting to address growing trade concerns, particularly the U.S.'s reciprocal tariffs. China's Commercial Minister Wang Wentao stressed the importance of dialogue and mutual respect, criticizing the tariffs for disrupting the long-established balance of global trade. He argued these tariffs ignore the years of multilateral negotiations that have benefited the U.S. significantly. Thousands of retirees and union members gathered in Buenos Aires to protest President Javier Milei's austerity measures, which they claim have significantly impacted their livelihoods. The demonstration, supported by Argentina's largest union, served as a precursor to a 24-hour strike affecting various sectors. According to Vilma Ripoll, a national deputy, Milei's fiscal policies have disproportionately targeted retirees, cutting their incomes and benefits. Now, despite Milei's success in reducing inflation, critics argue that his approach has exacerbated social inequality and hardship.
We are here on Wednesdays to regain the dignity that this government didn't give us. Since this government took over, they took away our medicine. We lost 8% purchasing power when they devalued. We lost 8%. Then Congress approved that restitution and they vetoed it. The president vetoed it, and on top of that, he had a barbecue celebrating what they did to us, the retirees.
My pension is 270,000 pesos. 270,000 pesos. It's not enough to buy meat or pay for utilities. I can't even buy my medication. I had prostate cancer surgery 2 years ago, and they've left me without medication.
And the news continues here on NET25. We'll be right back. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said it was up to Iran to decide whether the recent U.S. movement of B-2 bombers was a message to Tehran, as he voiced hope that U.S.-Iran negotiations over Tehran's nuclear program could be resolved peacefully. As many as 6 B-2 bombers relocated in March to a U.S.-British military base on the Indian Ocean island of Diego Garcia, amid a U.S. bombing campaign in Yemen and mounting tensions with Iran.
President Trump's been clear on that. Iran should not have a nuclear bomb, nuclear weapons. We very much hope the president is focused on doing that peacefully. That's very much what we would prefer as well. Our job at the Defense Department is to make sure we have all the assets available for any possible contingency, and that's what we'll continue to do. But the president is focused. There are negotiations ongoing. It's very much, as he's made clear, our preferred track. Our job is to devastate the Houthis, to open up the shipping lanes, and we'll continue to do that.
With Iran, if it requires military, we're going to have military. Israel will obviously be very much involved in that. He'll be the leader of that. But nobody leads us. We do what we want to do.
From the pages of a 1970s comic to the heart of today's political discourse, Captain Canuck is experiencing a powerful resurgence. Now, this maple leaf-clad hero, created to give Canada its own iconic figure, is finding new life in a climate of trade disputes and annexation anxieties, giving voice to a nation's sense of sovereignty. Take a look. And the news continues here on NET25. We'll be right back.
This decades-old maple leaf-clad superhero is staging a comeback. A symbol of Canadian pride, Captain Canuck has re-emerged from the shadows to fight for his country. His new arch-nemesis, American President Donald Trump.
All of a sudden, Trump gets into office, and he starts talking about annexation and tariffs. And yes, all of a sudden, Canadians are looking to Captain Canuck as a symbol. And it's basically, to them, Captain Canuck symbolizes independence.
Comic book creator Richard Cumley introduced Canadians to Captain Canuck in 1975.
This is the first issue.
Since then, the comic book series has been in and out of publication. But Cumley has seen renewed interest in the Canadian superhero, portrayed manhandling Trump and his billionaire advisor, Elon Musk, in this recent sketch.
We're getting more and more calls from Canadian companies who are expressing some keen interest in Captain Canuck, largely because of what's happening between America and Canada at this very time. So, in a sense, we have Mr. Trump to thank for a bit of resurgence.
Cumley's Captain Canuck comics and memorabilia were on display at the Vancouver Comic and Toy Show in early April. The comic book character, a Mountie endowed with superhuman strength after an alien encounter, has been beloved for years by some, including longtime fan Ron Roxburgh.
I found Captain Canuck at issue number 6, which was back in the early 80s. It was the first Canadian comic I had ever seen, so it kind of blew my mind.
America had Captain America, and we should have our own. And that was the thinking, and that was my thinking. And it wasn't as if I was so super conscious of it. It was just like, okay, there's a niche to be filled here. And that was the beginning, and it was well received.
Cumley says Trump's sweeping tariffs on Canadian imports and his musing about making Canada the 51st state has provided plenty of new inspiration for Captain Canuck's 50th anniversary issue.
I'm sort of predicting in the series that Canada is now recognized as a world power, mostly because of all the resources that are here in this country. I mean, and Canada is full of everything, all the resources you can imagine, from water to minerals to what have you. And so I envision Canada being recognized for that, in my stories. And then, but at the same time, needing more protection from terrorists and other groups that wanted to basically infiltrate Canada or destabilize Canada and take over Canada. So I was already dealing with those kind of issues. Of course, never in any of those stories was it America that was going to be taking over Canada. It was always the Russians or crazy groups of multinational groups.
While concerned about Trump's rhetoric, Cumley believes the U.S. will back off its northern neighbor eventually, and he says his Captain Canuck storyline has a happy ending.
And with that, we have tonight's broadcast. For everyone here on NET25, I'm Alma Angeles. Thank you all for joining us. Good night.